Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hello there, welcome to today's episode. This is about problems, or more specifically, what is the problem that your mind is trying to solve? Now, in my experience, for most people listening to this particular podcast, I guess, if you're here, you're probably somebody who's ambitious for your life, for your business. You're probably keen to be at your best. But life and business is a full contact sport. There's always problems to solve. That's just the way it is. And so, especially if you run your own business or you're a senior leader, it's one thing to be alive and solving problems. That's just the nature of the world. Very often that's how businesses get started, because we're solving a problem and people pay us to help solve the problem, which is good. But if you're not careful, you can kind of get caught up with your mind and your inner voice that's always talking about stuff and problems and gets in the way. Again, I just want to go back to basics today in terms of what I talk about at various points in this podcast, what I talk about all the time with clients and workshops, what I've written about in my book, The Inner CEO, is that when it comes down to it, you're not your mind and you're not your inner voice, you're not your thinking. You have all of those. You are the awareness or the observer of those things. And that is quite a profound statement if you really get it. But if you're looking for true, genuine growth, the more you really, really understand and see that truth, in my experience, the better everything gets. It doesn't remove problems at all, because that's life. That would be silly. But what it does do is enhance your ability to solve problems better, quicker, and in more effective ways. Now, this week for me was quite an intense week. It was one of those weeks where I was kind of going from one thing to the next without really having time to think, which was kind of good. One of the events was I was speaking at a health summit for entrepreneurs, and I was asked to speak about stress. So I was giving my take on that. And one of the angles that I brought in was about the inner voice. And again, it's not, everyone's aware, I think, that they have an inner voice, but they don't realize, I think, how critical it is in terms of understanding its role, and also understanding that it's not you and that you can't listen to it all the time, and that it can get in the way a lot. So that's the first point. I think the second point is that, like, this week, I also completed my 8-week foundation program called Mindshift, and it's in conjunction with podcaster Gary Fox. Great group of people, men and women, all different sizes of business, all different types of people. But some of the impact was quite universal in terms of just improved clarity, energy, sleep, better thinking, more progress. Just a real mix of really, really great stories. But one of the things that came up was just on the last day was somebody was sharing, they were asking about, like, my mind is looping on a problem, and I've been trying to get it to move on and get off it. Now, the fact that they're aware that that's happening now, to me, is a big win, because before the program, they wouldn't have been aware of the fact that their mind was looping on the problem. They just thought, well, that's kind of what you do. And I think it leads me to the point of this podcast, this particular episode, is that your inner talk is a form of protection. So be aware that you have an inner narrator. And if you're not quite sure, if your mind's kind of going, well, what inner narrator is he talking about? That's the one I'm talking about. Really simple thing, but it's quite profound. But that inner talk, in my experience, is generally a form of protection, because it's trying to prevent damage or pain to you. It's trying to solve problems, which is kind of the same thing as a form of protection. But not getting caught up with what it's saying all the time is really critical to your future success, your future clarity, your future enjoyment of life. Because when you get caught up with it, generally it creates tension, pressure, and very often you go into that kind of paralysis mode. And that paralysis mode could be something like fixating on a business problem or a business decision, or worrying about what might go wrong, or just looping on something that really you're just not really taking proper action on, even though you think you are by thinking about it. So again, in simple terms, that voice isn't you. It's your mind, or the spokesperson for your mind, trying to protect you from uncertainty. The mind likes predictability. It likes certainty, which is an interesting thing to say out loud, because in today's world right now, in 2025, certainty and It's just certainty and predictability are just not going to be here for a long time. We can't see it. There's too much going on. We're in a very interesting time in the Earth's history. But volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, they are here to stay. And so what I'm talking about today is going to help navigate through this period of time. Because when you get caught up with the inner voice, it actually blocks the very clarity that you're looking for. Even though you may be hearing this for the first time, maybe hopefully if you are, you're realizing, oh, wow, this is important. Now, the mind is usually very, very active in terms of it could be planning, it could be problem solving, it could be worrying, it could be dreaming. But generally, when it moves into problem solving and worry mode is what I'm talking about here. But even sometimes planning, because it's all about being in what I would call the analytical mode. Now, as an exercise in awareness, just to kind of be more observant of what your mind is saying and how much it's saying, tomorrow, if you're having a shower, when you wake up and you're in the shower, just become aware of what your mind is doing, what that inner voice is already on. So it's going to be solving stuff. It's going to be trying to fix stuff. It's going to be planning. It's going to be worrying. It's basically unbelievably active, unbelievably active. Now, for most people not listening to this podcast, that's just the way it is. They've never thought about, well, was that a problem? That's what I've always done. But if you're trying to get the best out of yourself, I think becoming aware of that is critical. Now, I've often had very smart leaders sitting here with me in my office in Ashford or sometimes by video, and they might be looping on a problem that is something like, I need to figure out my why, or I know I should be making more of my life, which all sounds good and good questions to have. But if you loop on them in analytical mode and your inner voice is just caught up with that, it will blow it out of proportion. And that will often lead to what I would call stuckness, where you say, I'm feeling stuck. And then the inner voice gets on to, oh, now I'm feeling stuck. How do I fix that? And the inner voice, again, it's not you. The real you is the awareness, the observer of that inner voice. So the inner voice is a part of your inner world, but it's a part of the mind, the personal thinking mind. Now, we want things to be under control. We want them to be predictable, but that really is our mind. But ironically, as I've said in recent podcasts, the more we grip harder mentally, the more tension we bring in, and that means the less flow that we actually allow. Now, when I was talking in Mindshift about that, the client was talking about looping on a problem and kind of getting annoyed that they couldn't stop the looping. Very common thing. But what I was saying there was more to become aware that, look, okay, fair enough. At the start, when you're becoming aware of it, the key mistake that most people made is that they react to it. So in a way, the inner voice reacts to its own inner voice. Once you're aware, and actually, from my point of view, it's like, oh, it's there. My job really is just to relax and let that go. Now, out of habit, it'll still probably loop for a while, but the more I just relax and let it go, how do you relax? Well, it's whatever works for you. It might be distracting yourself to something that genuinely helps you get distracted in a constructive way. It could be through breathing. It could be through a mindfulness technique. It could be through any sort of way that brings your mind a little bit more present. But the key move is to be okay with, okay, I'll let it loop. I'll let it talk away. I'm just not going to get caught up with what it's saying. And importantly, I'm not going to react and get annoyed at myself with the fact that it's still talking about stuff that doesn't make any sense to me anymore. And it's funny, very often, speak with somebody where I'm thinking a couple of people here over the years where their mind would always loop on finding somebody in their business or maybe in their life to be annoyed with. So, well, that person's annoying me. And they would just literally loop on that person, wind themselves up, cause a lot of stress for themselves until maybe they figure out a way to get them out of the business or maybe out of their life. And very often these habits are unconscious at the back of our mind. That's why sometimes maybe we can cause damage in relationships that really could have been avoided because we're caught up with our own inner voice, believing that we're right. But my inner voice, I know my inner voice is not always right. Very often it's wrong. But my inner voice is coming from a place of its own perspective with its, little ego and its fears and its concerns and its dreams. But ultimately it's not me. And what I found more and more is that the less I go with my inner voice, the less I get attached to the concerns that it has. And the more I just deal with 100% what's in front of me and deal with it effectively, moving myself into what I would call a free flow mode. Free flow mode is where I'm really grounded in the present. There's a focus on being in the moment, regardless of what my inner voice says. And that may sound very difficult, but it's entirely possible. Yes, it's an inner skill. Yes, it requires practice. But the rewards of being in that mode far outweigh anything else from my perspective. Now, just as a side note, this particular topic does link closely to, I think, one of my favorite audios that I've done for my new audio club. And I've called it the Unexpected Peak Performance Gear. It's audio number 2. It's about over 60 minutes of insights and ideas and questions, and I suppose sharing my own experiences about how to move more into that free flow mode. So if that's of interest, check out the audio club. That one audio alone, from my point of view, is multiple times value of the entire cost of the whole series. I really enjoyed making it. It brought something new out. And because the format is longer than normal than these podcasts, it just allows me to go deeper, which means that anybody who listens to it, I think, will really get way more value out of it. So if today's episode resonates on any level, maybe consider checking that out. But bringing it back to you for today, if for you, like, think of something that's on your mind, or just become aware of, like, well, hang on, what is my inner voice going on about at the moment? Like, what kind of problems or worries are there? Now, we're not saying that those worries are not real. Like, people get sick, you can get sick. There's all sorts of problems with cash flow, sales, goals. But all I'm asking is, what part of you is bothered by that? What part of you? It's not that it doesn't need to be addressed, but weirdly, the less you get caught up with that inner voice and its bother, because once you're caught up with the inner voice, you will feel tension and pressure. If you feel tension and pressure in the negative way I'm talking about, it does, to me, detract from your ability to solve that problem and to make progress. And just a question to consider is the situation you're thinking about, is that what's bothering you? Or is it that you're bothering yourself about the situation? For me, I think it's usually the latter. So maybe tomorrow morning, as well as the shower exercise, but when you wake up, before you get into the shower, you wake up tomorrow, just take a pause and just notice the first thoughts that your mind throws at you. And instead of kind of going with them and jumping into the car and going with them, just breathe and let them pass. If you do that every morning for a week, I think you're going to see something. I think you'll observe a shift. And the other thing I'll just throw in, because I threw this in Mind Shift with that person who was talking about the looping problem, is that, instead of actually leaving it open, tell your mind that I'm going to set aside 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, tomorrow, today, at a certain time. Be very specific. And when I get to that time, I'm going to write down all the angles of the problem. I'm going to look at it objectively, but then walk away from it. Don't let your mind think about it until that time. And even after you're done, maybe you set another time to look at it again. And when the inner voice comes in and goes, I want to think about that problem, just push it away. Why? Because in my experience, it's robbing you of your own clarity, and it's robbing you of being in a better state to solve problems and achieve progress. It also, by the way, gives your deeper intelligence, that intuitive intelligence deeper inside you, gives it more time to do its work. When your mind is really, really, really busy stewing on problems, looping on problems, it's blocking that natural intelligence inside. So to close out, what if true growth doesn't come from thinking harder and stewing on problems? What if it comes from loosening the grip of that inner voice that's trying to protect you, but in actual fact, I think, is actually damaging you? Because ultimately, you're not that voice. You're the one that observes the voice, and you don't have to follow that voice. That's it for this week. Ciao for now.